I was ghosted. Finding out about your ex's engagement, accidentally, painfully, and too late to feign even a drop of surprise. It all started with a treacherous ping in Slack. Walter Thompson himself, our chairman, a walking dinosaur in Ferragamo loafers, tagged the entire senior leadership. Reminder, strategic presentation tomorrow. Executive sales team, Chad, Brad, Todd. And that's it. Void. Not a single mention of Olivia Sterling. The woman who brought the company 3 of the last 5 multi-million-dollar contracts. The woman who, just last quarter, closed a deal on defense robotics that the Pentagon breathlessly reported to the Wall Street Journal about its failure. Nothing. I frantically scroll up. The same chilling picture. 2 months of reports, updates, burning deadlines, and my name might as well not exist. Like I'd been cut out of the spreadsheet. I sit in my glass cube. 7:04 p.m. 3 cold takeout coffee cups tower on my desk. I stare at my reflection in the glass and try to figure out at what goddamn point I became invisible in the company I thought I was helping build. My gaze snagged on a framed photo hanging on the wall. Me and Walter Thompson, 4 years ago, beaming and shaking hands on the day of my appointment as vice president. I remember him proudly calling me the closer. And now? Now he doesn't even seem to remember my name, except to dictate which font I should use. And how did I not notice it sooner? The change crept in gradually, like the stale smell from an old ventilation system. At first, you convince yourself that nothing's wrong. And then that smell permeates every corner of your consciousness. First, they changed the seating chart without even bothering to warn me. Then, at the board of directors dinner, suddenly there weren't enough seats. Last week, Walter Thompson, passing me in the elevator, looked right through me, as if I were a ghost in an expensive suit. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened next. The memo. It appeared the next morning, like a bolt from the blue. Subject, sales alignment, updated policy from Walter Thompson for executive leadership. I still remember every letter of that fateful line. Women are certainly valuable in support functions, but historically underperform in key sales positions. To protect profits, sales decision-making will remain the prerogative of men. The air was knocked out of my lungs. I froze, unable to breathe or blink. My fingers, glued to the trackpad, hovered. I reread the sentence again and again, waiting for the punchline, some clever twist. But no. It wasn't a joke. Not even a whispered conversation behind closed doors. It was written in black and white, on a soulless sheet of paper, like a weather forecast. This memo, nothing short of a declaration of war. And old Walter Thompson, it seems, has no idea that I've got a ticking time bomb under his holiest of holies, the boardroom. For 2 long months, I worked on a deal in the shadows, bypassing all official channels. Too risky, too volatile for the traditional route. A clandestine takeover of Novatech Logistics, an AI-driven logistics company. Bleeding money, on the verge of bankruptcy, but holding a portfolio of patents poised to disrupt the market. I met their founder at a charity auction for tech geniuses, managed to spill a gin and tonic on my favorite heels, and sent them our presentation as an apology. I opened it out of boredom, but by the 6th slide, I was electrified. This company is a rocket ship. If launched correctly, it won't just hit targets, it'll obliterate them. Novatech Logistics, a company whose fate hung by a thread. One wrong move, and it would dissolve into the faceless mass of other acquisitions, not even making it to the end of the year. The problem is, at Walter Thompson, Novatech Logistics was seen as a disease. Too risky, too new, and, oh God, female-led. Their CTO, a young Korean woman, dared to call their products geriatric junk at a public event. I didn't even whisper about Novatech to my boss. Why would I? He already saw my gender as a liability to the company. So I did what many women before me in this industry have done, I went dark. Late-night negotiations, data mining through VPNs, a shell corporation, lawyers who drafted an NDA so ironclad it felt like it was sealed in blood. And now, the final act, only one signature remained. The deal was done. The ink was waiting for its moment. But the revenge, it was just beginning. By noon, a company-wide memo spread like a virus. The unspoken, oppressive tension hung in the air. I felt it in every cell of my skin, saw it in the hunted looks of the junior analysts avoiding me like I was a leper. Brad, the smug type who addressed his assistant exclusively as sweetheart, gave me a pitying nod in the hallway. Todd, the cynical pragmatist, just shrugged, saying, "Hey, Olivia, it's just business, nothing personal." I plastered on a smile, feeling it contort on my lips. Business, nothing personal, I repeated to myself, dripping with sarcasm. At 3:17 p.m., I printed it out. One copy. Thick, expensive paper. Perfect. Not a single smudge. Carefully placing it in a red folder emblazoned with confidential, I tossed the folder into my bag and walked into the conference room with an air of nonchalance, as if heading to another routine meeting. 8 men in impeccably tailored suits, 2 high-priced consultants, and a presentation clicker they passed around like it was a red-hot potato. Walter Thompson, droning on about some lean acquisition, whatever that meant, stopped mid-sentence when I took a vacant seat. Without asking permission, I simply sat down. He gave me an icy stare, as if I'd crashed a private yacht club gathering. "Olivia Sterling," he drawled through gritted teeth. "I wasn't aware you were invited." I gave him a dazzling smile. "I never left." Brad let out a nervous chuckle. Todd leaned forward, like watching the climax of a high-stakes courtroom drama. I expected objections from Walter Thompson, but he just snorted through his nose, like a horse bothered by a fly. It didn't faze me. I decisively opened my laptop and projected my slides onto the screen. The screen flickered, and the title shone, Market Domination, the Novatech Logistics Strategy. The air in the room seemed to instantly thin. Novatech Logistics? Walter Thompson muttered, blinking rapidly, as if I'd uttered the devil's name. "They're bankrupt, Brad." "Didn't they just lay off 60% of their engineers?" "That's why they're affordable," I retorted. And then I launched in, no beating around the bush, no hesitation. I tore through the presentation like a chainsaw through plywood, gaping holes in logistics, revolutionary freight prediction algorithms, undisputed last-mile dominance, and, oh yes, a barely noticeable footnote on page 17 of their patent application, granting us exclusive license to autonomous delivery routes in a full 17 states. Someone in the room gasped involuntarily. Walter Thompson was frozen, as if struck by lightning. Not a sound, only his stony face and tightly pressed lips betraying the storm raging inside. He was watching his empire crumble, swept away into the abyss of the ocean. I finished the presentation with a final slide, $120 million. Projected profit, a 4-fold increase in 14 months. A ringing silence descended. Todd was the first to break it. "Is this real?" I nodded, never taking my eyes off Thompson. "They'll sign the contract tonight." And then the unthinkable happened. Walter Thompson snapped his pen in half. In his hand. The sound of the crack cut through the silence, and ink splattered across the table, resembling a crime scene. "You weren't authorized," he hissed, each word a lash. "You're not authorized to conduct acquisitions." "That memo." "Ah, yes, I read that memo," I interrupted, my voice steel. Then, like a magician, I pulled the red folder from my bag and placed it on the table with the confidence of a gambler laying down a straight flush. "I think you'll want to read this, too." Inside was my own memo, vetted by legal, approved by the board, and dated 3 weeks prior. It granted me temporary authority to conduct acquisitions under Clause 9b, in the event of revenue endangerment due to management incompetence or inaction. Walter Thompson had signed it himself, mindlessly scrawling his signature on a stack of papers while barking orders over the intercom. I had a recording of that call. He paled as the realization dawned. He stammered, like a schoolboy caught cheating. I stood up, closed my laptop, and gave him the smile of a predator, a she-wolf in expensive lipstick. I didn't need your authorization, Walter Thompson, I purred. I only needed your signature. And, turning on my heel, I walked out in triumph. But the real pleasure came later, at 2:03 a.m. When I closed the deal with Novatech Logistics, it dawned on me that he still didn't understand exactly where I was going to put that damn memo. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. Not from nerves, no. Just the adrenaline of triumph burning off slowly, like smoldering embers. It's not the kind of fever that makes you toss and turn. This is the victory heat that makes you sit in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, in a silk blouse carelessly stained with triumph and espresso, watching the city shimmering below like a dying server farm, and think, now that's what it means to play your last trump card. At 1:58 a.m., the Novatech Logistics team and I stood in the dim light of the conference room, where the nauseating smell of burnt popcorn and despair hung in the air. The company's founder, Owen, looked like a man who had forgotten how to blink. The collar of his shirt was treacherously shiny with sweat, but when he handed me the pen, his hand remained unwavering. "Are you sure your people won't flinch?" he asked, his voice full of tension. In response, as I signed the contract in a clear, precise hand, I said, "My people don't even suspect we're married." And I added, with a barely perceptible smirk, "The honeymoon starts now." At 2:03 a.m., the deal was officially done. Novatech Logistics, valued at $120 million on paper, but worth 5 times as much in buried gold, now belonged to me. Not Walter Thompson with his exorbitant ambitions, not Chad with his perpetual cigar and empty promises, not those smug rainmakers who for years couldn't close anything bigger than a used Toyota deal. I carefully put the final version of the contract into the same red folder where his sexist memo once rested, and, seized by an intoxicating sense of revenge inaccessible to MBA graduates, slipped into my car. The leather seat creaked plaintively under my weight, as if foreboding something unholy. At 2:27 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot of our headquarters. The security guard waved me in lazily. He was used to my late returns, although he never understood their true reason. Until today. The executive floor was dimly lit, only the ghostly blue glow of the sensor lamps dispelling the thick darkness. I crept down the hallway, trying not to disturb the ominous silence. Past Brad's office, with his ever-present whiskey cart and dusty, unread business magazines. Further on, Todd's shrine to vanity, hung with plaques from golf tournaments, like trophies of vanquished rivals. And finally, Walter Thompson's corner tomb, his personal atonement suite. The door to his office opened with a quiet click, reminiscent of the sound of a safe opening. Inside, everything was impeccable, as always. On the desk, maniacal order. A Mont-Blanc pen lay parallel to the edge of the desk, sheets of paper aligned with millimeter precision, and the single photograph of his sailing yacht off the coast of the Hamptons seemed to serve as silent proof of his manly power. But it was her that caught my eye, that same memo, still taped to the inside of the glass cabinet. "NO Women in Sales Decision-Making Positions," typed in Comic Sans, in capital letters, centered. It was like an altar, an involuntary intrusion into the iconic temple of outdated prejudices. I took the Novatech Logistics contract out of my bag, tore off a piece of double-sided tape, and stuck it right over this vile note. I didn't bother aligning it. Let the title peek out brazenly from behind the edge of the page, right above my signature. Novatech Logistics Acquisition. Signed at 2:03 a.m. And then, succumbing to the petty but so pleasant poetics of the moment, I wrote in red ink, closed, Olivia Sterling, VP of Sales Strategy. P.S. Your memo font sucks. I froze, basking in the silence, letting the words permeate the air. Surgically precise. Clean. Personal. And just as I was about to leave, I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't seen before. The barely noticeable blue light of the webcam. Recording. Damn that new Walter Thompson automatic registration system that hadn't been fixed since the intern's information leak. It had been working all this time. A smile blossomed on my lips. I looked straight into the lens. "Good morning, Walter Thompson," I whispered, savoring the moment. "I hope your espresso tastes like regret." But what I didn't know then, what none of us could have even imagined, was that the contract wasn't the only thing that launched at 2:03 a.m. That treacherous blue light wasn't just connected to the security system. It was broadcasting everything that was happening in the office, live to the entire executive network, including, of course, the board of directors. That memo was doomed to become a viral sensation. I was awakened by a barrage of 43 missed calls, 2 board meeting summonses, and a mailbox that looked more like a battlefield. Email subjects ranged from panicked urgent, "Call back immediately," to incredulous, "Is this really true?" And finally, the unambiguous, "Olivia Sterling, you go girl." The video had leaked not just to the board and not just to Walter Thompson, but to everyone who had access to the internal server. Apparently, the automatic recording system from the camera in Walter Thompson's office was backing up directly into our Internet Archive to, and I quote, "ensure transparency and showcase leadership models" during his last quarterly address. And there it was, footage of me taping the Novatech Logistics contract over his asinine "No Girls Allowed" memo, automatically tagged as Leadership Example H. By 7:12 a.m., half the company was enjoying the show. By 7:46 a.m., someone had thoughtfully added subtitles. And by 8:02 a.m., a junior lawyer had GIF'd my wink with the caption, "When your boss says women can't close deals, but you just bought a whole company before sunrise." I wasn't planning on leaking anything, but I swear, I wasn't even a little bit sorry. By 8:30 a.m., I was standing in the boardroom, all glass walls and searing glares from a dozen stuffed suits. They looked torn between wanting to applaud and wanting to burn me at the stake. Walter Thompson, frozen at the end of the table, steepled his fingers. His jaw was working overtime, but he didn't say a word, didn't even blink, just radiated molten rage. Priya Sharma, the chairwoman and the woman Walter Thompson once dismissed as an overrated HR lady, was at the head of the table. "So," she said, in a voice so icy it could freeze hell over. "The Novatech Logistics acquisition is complete," she announced, slamming the documents onto the table. "Signed, sealed, and projected ROI of, at minimum, 400%. Todd, a few chairs down, couldn't help but whistle appreciatively before catching himself. "Walter Thompson," she drawled, her voice dripping with barely contained fury. She blindsided senior management. Acted alone, negotiated in violation of. I held up a finger. Not flippantly, but with enough authority to cut him off. "Clause 9b, I said, calmly. "Temporary acquisition autonomy in the event of management oversight or inaction. Signed by you personally and rubber-stamped by legal 3 weeks ago." I continued, "Remember that stack of papers you signed while ranting about LinkedIn bots stealing your identity?" Priya Sharma raised an eyebrow. "Do you have proof of this?" I nodded, sliding a prepared folder across the table. Highlighted, time-stamped, meticulously curated. "And the video recording?" Gary, one of the oldest board members, asked. A staunch traditionalist whose idea of inclusivity was adding walnuts to the office muffins. "Wasn't me," I said flatly. "But I'm not apologizing." My words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. I could practically hear Walter Thompson grinding his teeth. "You humiliated the chairman," Gary said, almost reproachfully. "I exposed a shady deal. If anyone's humiliated, it's by their own conscience." Walter Thompson slammed his fist on the table. "She violated the chain of command, undermined the management structure." "Chain of command?" I locked eyes with him. "You excluded me from strategy sessions. You denied me access to executive briefings. You issued a directive banning women from making decisions. You benched me." "I didn't undermine the hierarchy. I proved it was broken." Priya Sharma leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Olivia Sterling," she said, testing the name on her tongue. "Do you have any idea the hornet's nest you've stirred up?" I held her gaze, unflinching. "More than." It was time someone struck a match. A flicker of a smile played on her lips, subtle, but definitely there. Walter Thompson, however, wasn't backing down. Not even close. He had an ace up his sleeve, and I felt it coming as he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope labeled, "Confidential. Olivia Sterling Personnel File." In that moment, I knew he hadn't come to kill the deal. He'd come to kill me. He placed the envelope on the table like a death shroud. Thick, ominous, yellowed with time and resentment. I didn't touch it, just watched it sit there, radiating menace, as Walter Thompson leaned back in his chair, looking like a man who believed he had finally cornered a storm he had foolishly underestimated. "For the record," he said slowly, with thinly veiled triumph, "this employee has a documented history of exceeding authority, consistent disregard for instructions, and unacceptable workplace conduct." A heavy silence fell over the boardroom. Several directors shifted uncomfortably, sensing a trap, like they were being hustled with an old card trick, but no one spoke. Gary cleared his throat, trying to defuse the tension. Priya Sharma, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes, her gaze sharp and penetrating. "Inappropriate behavior?" she asked, her voice as cold as ice. "Are you accusing someone of misconduct?" Walter Thompson confidently tapped his finger on the folder. "I'm just stating the facts," he said emphatically. "Late meetings with suppliers, secret negotiations, unsecured data transfer. Olivia Sterling built her empire on back channels and shady deals." He smirked, not triumphantly, but with a cynical superiority, as if offering his own rope to the executioner, confident that someone else would be hanged. "And the internal staff," he added, glancing in my direction, "her visits to my office at 2 in the morning. It borders on direct insubordination." I barely suppressed a laugh. Barely, but not a muscle twitched on my face. "Steal." Priya Sharma turned to me. "Olivia Sterling." I didn't even flinch. "May I?" I asked, nodding towards the folder lying in front of me. Walter Thompson nodded condescendingly, like a monarch granting pardon. Slowly, as if opening Pandora's box, I opened the folder. Inside was a carefully selected collection of compromising materials, carelessly cropped screenshots, snippets of emails, murky statements from anonymous cowards, and, the highlight, a photo of me in a hoodie, emerging from the Novatech Logistics elevator late at night. In other words, evidence confirming that I was, damn it, working. "There are no violations here," I declared, casting aside false modesty. "Just incompetence. I followed every letter of our charter." "Overtime meetings?" "Covered by temporary powers." "Night visits?" "The lawyers all signed off." "Anonymous tip-offs?" I waved the papers dismissively, as if brushing off dirt, the product of the very men who couldn't close a deal since the pandemic. Walter Thompson leaned forward, his feigned confidence beginning to crack. "You acted on your own, Olivia Sterling. You crossed the line, made it personal. And then I did the unthinkable, something I hadn't allowed myself to do in these stuffy boardrooms for the past 10 years. I burst out laughing. "It became personal the day you declared war on half the company with your idiotic memo. The very day you proudly announced to the press our new era of frugality, intelligence, and focus, subtly hinting at the systematic elimination of women in leadership positions. I wasn't just rebelling. I became the embodiment of efficiency. Sorry if it spoils your perfect image." Priya Sharma raised her hand, silencing the buzz in the room with a single gesture. There was steel in her voice. "Let's be clear," she said sharply. "Olivia Sterling, your acquisition will be reviewed in due course. But, according to preliminary data, it is not only legally sound, but is also likely to be the most profitable initiative in the last 2 years." She turned to Walter Thompson, her gaze burning through him. In her hand was his fatal document. "This circular," Priya Sharma's words were like a whip crack, "is immediately forwarded to Human Resources, Internal Audit, and the Ethics Committee." The blood drained from Walter's face. He gasped for air. "Let me remind you," Priya continued, not giving him time to recover, "that discriminatory directives are a direct violation of both our company charter and state law." Walter Thompson tried to justify himself, mumbling something incoherent. It was internal culture, a suggestion, not policy. But it was too late. Everyone saw everything. The circular, the video recordings, the irrefutable evidence. At that moment, it became clear, the room no longer belonged to him. He had lost control. And then my phone came to life, announcing a new message. Owen from Novatech Logistics just sent you the promised surprise. Check your inbox. Use wisely. I opened the attachment, paused for a moment, and then a predatory smile spread across my face. Walter Thompson didn't seem to suspect that while he was trying to nail me to the pillory with outdated memos and his maniacal suspicions, another, far more serious crack had formed in his carefully constructed empire. And that's where I was going to stick my crowbar. The file was called Project Garnet. Very subtle, Owen. For internal use only, huh? I opened it right under the table, trying to keep my hands still on my knees, although my heart was pounding in my chest like a war drum during a thunderstorm. The loaded file turned out to be neither a boring spreadsheet nor an ingenious revenue forecasting scheme. It was a video recording, a screenshot dated 2 months earlier. On the screen was Walter Thompson during a Zoom call, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his gaze blurred, the corners of his mouth betraying him by drooping. And he's talking to someone I recognized instantly, Adam B., the COO of Archon Systems, one of our fiercest competitors for the Novatech Logistics deal. My fingers gripped the edge of the table. And then, from Walter Thompson's mouth came not just a curse, it was a nuclear explosion. Let Olivia Sterling waste her precious time, he spat, his voice dripping with venom. If she lands Novatech Logistics, I'll bury her in committee. We'll stall for 2 weeks, let them bleed. Then we swoop in, offer 30% less. Everyone wins. The main thing is that this upstart doesn't suspect anything until it's too late. He cynically raised his glass to the camera, twisting his face into a semblance of a smile. No woman in this company closes any deal unless I say she's allowed to. The audio ended with Adam B.'s words, agreed, and a soft calendar reminder ping, further sabotage strategy. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird, blurring my vision. I looked up to see Walter Thompson, still pontificating to the board about corporate order and the unimpeachable integrity of the brand, completely unaware that his grave had just been dug and nailed shut by himself from the inside. Without hesitation, I double-tapped the screen. The image from my phone was instantly projected onto the screen in the boardroom. Like a bolt from the blue, like the crack of a whip, Walter Thompson's vile, greasy voice boomed, filling the space. The air seemed to freeze. The boardroom was so quiet you could hear hearts beating. I saw eyes darting, from the screen to Walter Thompson, from him to me. The tension exploded like an overloaded transformer. Priya Sharma didn't flinch, but the whitening knuckles of her fingers betrayed her fury. Gary went white as a sheet. When the recording ended, Walter Thompson looked like someone had shoved a burning coal down his throat. I can explain, he croaked, spitting out the words. No, Priya Sharma cut him off, rising to her full height. You can resign. And yes, the recording was made illegally. It was provided by the company you were trying to sink. She cut him off as if severing a thread. Olivia Sterling didn't make it. It's the work of your so-called victim. I rose slowly, each movement deliberate and significant. Let the record show, I said, my gaze burning into everyone present. The chairman of this company criminally conspired to disrupt a legitimate acquisition, secretly colluded with a competitor, and openly admitted to gender discrimination, all of which is recorded. I turned to Walter Thompson, and my voice rang with steel. You didn't just write me off, Walter. You tried to bury me alive. I hope you brought a shovel when you came here. He rose from his seat like an old, broken mannequin. Trembling fingers frantically grabbed at papers, as if afraid to lose them. Not a single word, not a shadow of apology, just the quiet sound of the agony of a man who suddenly realized that his power was just a fragile sandcastle, and I was the relentless tide, ready to wash him into oblivion. Priya Sharma gave a barely perceptible gesture to 2 HR representatives, frozen by the door like stone guards. Escort Mr. Walter Thompson from the building, her voice was cold and impassive. They stepped forward, their faces impenetrable masks. Walter Thompson gave me one last look, full of desperate, unspoken pleading. I just raised an eyebrow, ironically quipping, "Don't forget to smile at security." He didn't smile. As the door closed behind him, a collective sigh of relief swept through the boardroom. Todd muttered, as if waking from a nightmare, "My God." Gary took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose wearily, as if sifting through every decision he'd made in the last 10 years, trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. But I wasn't going to stop there. Turning to Priya Sharma, I said clearly and forcefully, "I demand a full audit of all memos, hiring freezes, and board appointments for the past 18 months. Priya Sharma nodded curtly, as if giving the go-ahead. Granted. And, unable to resist, I added, "And I want his office. Right now." The audacity drew a short laugh from Todd. Even the usually unflappable Gary smiled slightly. "Done," confirmed Priya Sharma, her voice businesslike. "Effective immediately." I left without another word. The sound of my heels, sharp and confident, echoed down the hall like a drumroll, announcing the dawn of a new era. Back in my office, now mine, formerly Gerald's, another surprise awaited me. An envelope. No return address, just a laconic inscription, Heron. Inside was a black and white photograph, snatched from the distant past, about 15 years old, me, young and full of hope, shaking hands with Walter Thompson and another person I hadn't seen in over a decade. The caption under the picture read, "Welcome, our youngest intern, Olivia Sterling." And on the back, roughly scrawled in marker, "I told you, you'd outstrip us all." It was my old mentor, Walter Thompson's predecessor, and this was apparently his last lesson: leave the kingdom in the best hands. By noon, the nameplate on the door had already been replaced. Now it proudly displayed, "Olivia Sterling, Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations." But unofficially, I had become a legend. The woman who overthrew the chairman of the board at 2 in the morning, armed only with a contract, a red folder, and a brazen smirk, the echo of which reverberated throughout the corporate structure, making even the highest offices tremble. Chad sent out a soulless announcement about a new broom, but the employees exploded with creativity, turning it into a viral masterpiece of memes, emojis, and gifs of Bayo smashing through all obstacles. It hardly affected me. I had real work to do. While Walter Thompson was licking his wounds somewhere on a golf course in Palm Springs, I was hard at work reshaping the sales team. First thing, destroy all those moronic rules, reeking of cigars and male chauvinism. Second, promote the talented women whom Walter Thompson had blacklisted. I offered Rose from Medical Technology the opportunity to head the promising biopharma division. I gave Maya from the packaging department complete freedom in the field of cross-border AI logistics. And I made Jackie, whom Walter Thompson considered too emotional for serious deals, my right hand. Because emotions are not a weakness, but a powerful engine. The costumed machos would never understand that. Meanwhile, Novatech Logistics was gaining momentum like a rocket. Information about the deal leaked to the press before we could organize an official release. Headlines crashed down on us like an avalanche. Woman pulls off $120 million deal in the dead of night. Vice President Olivia Sterling scores a crushing victory over the chairman in this corporate chess game. Is this the rising star of the sales department? Questions rained down, but I remained silent. No interviews. Not yet. Let them guess, let them speculate. Is it luck? Ruthlessness? Or just a rare confluence of circumstances, like lightning caught in a bottle? I was all of that, and more. But through the triumphal hum of victory, a sinister glimmer broke through. A shadow, lurking on the periphery of consciousness. An unspoken question, tormenting me from within: why Novatech Logistics specifically? I understood perfectly well why I needed this acquisition. The patents, the real value, the limitless possibilities, it was all obvious. But I hadn't asked myself why they agreed so easily. Why the founder himself sent me the secret Project Pomegranate file even before the official closing of the deal. And so, digging through piles of reports buried under mountains of logistics data and financial forecasts, I stumbled upon it. A single line, marked with a red flag. An archive of internal board of directors correspondence, flagged by the compliance department in February 2021. My heart pounded. I opened the archive, typed my name into the search, empty. Nothing. Then I typed Gerald, and got 3 results. 3 small, ominous results that could turn everything upside down. The first document was a formal act of compliance. The second was a dry report from a board meeting. But the third burned like acid. It was correspondence from 2 years ago, a chain of emails sent by Walter Thompson Owen himself, the founder of Novatech Logistics. The subject was chilling, understanding. Long-term alignment of values. Then, words that sent a shiver down my spine: let's agree, if she gets too close, slow her down. Create the illusion of victory. And then take it all back. It's not about Olivia Sterling. It's about keeping power in the right hands. Attached to the letter was a file, a dossier. My name, my biography, my entire background, including my salary history. I gripped the desk, my gaze fixed on the screen. Rage boiled inside, my pulse hammered in my temples. The deal with Novatech Logistics was not just derailed. It was a carefully planned, long-term trap. Owen had turned the game around at the last moment. But why? Before I was sucked into the abyss of despair, my assistant's voice pulled me out of the maelstrom. Olivia Sterling, you have a guest in the reception area. He says he's an employee of Novatech Logistics. He says that.